Beyond the annals of history, Alexander the Great stands as a titan, a figure whose ambition reshaped the ancient world and whose legacy echoes through millennia. Born into royalty in the Macedonian kingdom, his destiny was intertwined with a future of unparalleled conquest. From a young age, he exhibited an extraordinary intellect and a spirit unyielding, characteristics that would define his legendary campaigns. His formative years under the tutelage of Aristotle, the renowned philosopher, sculpted not only a warrior but a thinker, instilling in him a love for knowledge, exploration, and the Hellenic ideals he would later spread across a vast empire. His story is not merely one of military might, but of a singular, relentless will that dared to challenge the very limits of the known world, leaving an indelible mark on civilization. Our journey into Alexander's life begins in Pella, the bustling capital of Macedon, where he was born in 356 before Common Era. The city itself was a testament to the burgeoning power of the Macedonian kingdom, a kingdom that, under his father, Philip II, would rise to dominate Greece. Pella, with its grand palaces and vibrant marketplaces, was a cauldron of political intrigue and burgeoning military might. It was here, amidst the growing prestige of his father's reign, that Alexander's earliest impressions of power, strategy, and the world's vastness were formed. The environment was ripe for nurturing a future conqueror, a prince destined not just to inherit a throne, but to expand its dominion geometrically, far beyond the wildest dreams of his ancestors. His mother was Olympias, an Epiriote princess renowned for her fiery temperament and devout devotion to arcane religious cults, particularly those involving serpents. This connection to the mystics, some say, imbued Alexander with a sense of divine destiny. She was a formidable woman whose influence on her son was profound and complex, instilling in him a belief in his divine lineage and an unwavering confidence in his own capabilities. Olympias fiercely protected Alexander's claim to the throne, often clashing with his father's other wives and political factions. Her unyielding nature, combined with Alexander's burgeoning ambition, created a powerful dynamic that would shape his early character and reinforce his future resolve to conquer. Alexander's father, Philip II, was a military genius and a shrewd statesman. He transformed Macedon from a peripheral kingdom into the dominant power in Greece, laying the groundwork for Alexander's future conquests. Philip's innovative military reforms, particularly the development of the Macedonian phalanx, were revolutionary. He instilled in Alexander the principles of warfare, leadership, and the art of diplomacy through both direct instruction and by example. Their relationship, while politically charged and at times tumultuous due to Philip's many marriages and Alexander's mother's influence, was undeniably foundational. It was from Philip that Alexander learned the practicalities of command and the relentless pursuit of strategic objectives. Even as a young boy, Alexander demonstrated an extraordinary thirst for knowledge and a keen intellectual curiosity that set him apart. While other youths might have been content with childhood diversions, Alexander sought out tutors, devoured texts, and engaged in fervent discussions about history, philosophy, and geography. This early intellectual engagement was not merely an academic pursuit. It was fundamental to his development as a leader. It cultivated a mind that could synthesize vast amounts of information, adapt to new situations, and understand the diverse cultures he would later encounter. This deep-seated inquiry laid the groundwork for his strategic brilliance and his relatively enlightened approach to conquered peoples. Growing up within the Macedonian court also meant early exposure to the cutthroat world of politics and warfare. From lavish banquets to military drills, Alexander observed firsthand the intricacies of power. He saw how alliances were forged and broken, how rivals were neutralized, and how a king commanded loyalty. These observations, often harsh and brutal, were invaluable lessons. He learned the importance of decisiveness, the weight of command, and the constant vigilance required to maintain power. This early immersion in the realities of statecraft endowed him with a pragmatic understanding of governance that belied his young age, making him acutely aware of the forces at play in his father's ambitious kingdom. Physical prowess was as crucial as intellectual development in ancient Macedon, and Alexander excelled in both. He trained rigorously in wrestling, horsemanship, and various forms of combat, honing his body to match his formidable intellect. These physical disciplines were not just for military readiness. They were integral to Macedonian aristocratic culture, signaling strength, courage, and leadership. Alexander embraced these challenges with zeal, demonstrating an athletic ability that won him admiration and respect among his peers and soldiers alike. This combination of physical and mental superiority would become a hallmark of his reign, allowing him to lead from the front, inspiring profound loyalty and awe in his troops on the battlefield. Perhaps one of the most enduring anecdotes from Alexander's youth is his taming of Bucephalus, a magnificent, wild black stallion deemed ungovernable by all others. While his father and the stable hands despaired, young Alexander observed that the horse was simply afraid of its own shadow. He gently turned the horse towards the sun, calming it, then mounted and rode it with ease. This feat, performed when he was barely a teenager, showcased his exceptional intuition, courage, and understanding of animal behavior. It became a powerful symbol of his ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles through insight and determination, foretelling his future mastery over empires and armies. Bucephalus would remain his loyal steed throughout his campaigns, a testament to Alexander's extraordinary bond. Recognizing his son's extraordinary potential, Philip II sought the finest tutor for Alexander, the renowned philosopher Aristotle. For 3 years, from the age of 13 to 16, Alexander studied under Aristotle at the Temple of the Nymphs in Myesa. This was not a mere academic exercise. It was a profound mentorship that shaped Alexander's mind in ways that few rulers could claim. Aristotle brought a systematic intellectual rigor to Alexander's education, moving beyond mere military strategy to embrace ethics, politics, rhetoric, and natural sciences. The philosopher aimed to cultivate a truly enlightened monarch, embedding principles that contrasted sharply with the barbaric image often associated with Macedon. This education cemented Alexander's belief in the superiority of Greek culture. Aristotle introduced Alexander to the works of Homer, especially the Iliad, which became Alexander's cherished companion throughout his life. He carried a copy, annotated by Aristotle, and slept with it under his pillow alongside a dagger. Achilles, the legendary Greek hero, became Alexander's role model, a figure of incredible courage, honor, and martial prowess. This literary immersion fueled Alexander's imagination, imbuing him with a deep appreciation for heroic deeds and a desire to emulate and perhaps even surpass the legends of antiquity. The epic tales of gods and heroes were not just stories. They were a blueprint for glory, igniting in Alexander a relentless drive for personal fame and immortal renown that would propel his future conquests. Aristotle's curriculum extended far beyond literature and philosophy. He engaged Alexander in deep studies of medicine, botany, zoology, and geography. This broad intellectual foundation provided Alexander with practical knowledge that would prove invaluable on his campaigns. His understanding of medicinal herbs, for instance, helped his army survive unfamiliar diseases, while his geographical insights aided in strategic planning and logistics. The philosopher instilled in him a scientific curiosity that saw Alexander dispatching naturalists and scholars to collect specimens and document observations during his expeditions. This polymathic education set Alexander apart, making him not just a warrior, but an explorer of both the physical world and the realms of knowledge. The relationship between Alexander and Aristotle was a complex one, a blend of profound respect and intellectual sparring. Aristotle challenged Alexander's assumptions, honed his critical thinking skills, and encouraged him to question and analyze. This intellectual training was crucial for a young prince destined to lead vast armies and govern diverse populations. The ability to think critically, to weigh evidence, and to make informed decisions under pressure was a skill Aristotle painstakingly cultivated in his royal pupil. While their views would diverge later in life, particularly regarding the treatment of non-Greeks, Aristotle's foundational impact on Alexander's logical reasoning and strategic mind was undeniably immense. Even after Aristotle left Macedon, the bond forged between teacher and student endured through correspondence. Alexander often sought Aristotle's advice and even sent him rare specimens and detailed accounts from his expeditions, demonstrating a continued commitment to knowledge and intellectual exchange. This ongoing dialogue underscores the profound impact Aristotle had, not just as a temporary tutor, but as a lifelong intellectual guide. The philosopher's teachings provided Alexander with a framework for understanding the world, a curiosity that transcended conquest, and a commitment to observation and reason that influenced his actions as king and commander. Aristotle's vast knowledge base allowed him to impart not only theoretical wisdom, but also practical skills. He taught Alexander about geology, helping him understand terrain for military strategy. about astronomy, aiding in navigation, and even about rhetoric, crucial for public oration and inspiring troops. His holistic approach to education prepared Alexander for every facet of leadership, equipping him with a unique blend of martial prowess and intellectual depth. This breadth of learning was unusual for a leader of his time, granting Alexander a distinct advantage over his adversaries and allowing him to govern with a perspective broadened by diverse fields of study. The philosopher's influence on Alexander was so profound that Alexander later remarked he was more indebted to Aristotle for living well than to Philip for living. This famous quote encapsulates the deep gratitude and immense respect Alexander held for his teacher. Aristotle had given him not just lessons, but a way of seeing the world, a way of thinking that transformed a prince into a leader of men and a cultural unifier. The intellectual seed sown by Aristotle blossomed into Alexander's vision of spreading Hellenic culture, of building cities of learning, and of fostering a world where reason and knowledge could flourish alongside military might. This dream, though imperfectly realized, was a direct consequence of his years in Mieza. Despite his intellectual pursuits, Alexander was never distant from the practicalities of warfare. During his adolescence, he was already participating in military campaigns alongside his father, gaining invaluable battlefield experience. He learned firsthand the coordination of troops, the psychology of combat, and the brutal realities of ancient warfare. This practical training complemented Aristotle's philosophical lessons, creating a truly unique leader who understood both the profound theoretical aspects of governance and the visceral practicalities of command on the front lines. He was not merely a scholar king, but a warrior philosopher, a synthesis that would prove unstoppable. One of his first significant commands came during the pivotal Battle of Chaeronea in 338 before Common Era, when he was just 18 years old. This battle fundamentally reshaped the landscape of ancient Greece. Philip II led the Macedonian army against a coalition of Greek city-states, primarily Athens and Thebes. Alexander was given command of the companion cavalry, an elite unit. His charge proved decisive, smashing through the famed Theban Sacred Band, a legendary unit of warriors. This victory solidified Macedonian hegemony over Greece and marked Alexander's emergence as a formidable military leader in his own right, impressing both his father and the veteran generals. The victory at Chaeronea was a watershed moment, ending the independence of Greek city-states and uniting them, albeit under Macedonian dominance. Philip II established the League of Corinth, ostensibly a Hellenic alliance against Persia, but truly a mechanism for Macedonian control. Alexander played a crucial role in securing this new order, demonstrating not only his military prowess, but also his nascent political acumen. He understood the strategic implications of unification, even if achieved by force, setting the stage for the Grand Persian campaign that would become his life's defining endeavor, transforming a regional power into the springboard for an immense empire. Following Chaeronea, Alexander's relationship with his father became increasingly strained. Philip II, now secure in his Greek dominance, decided to marry Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman, potentially threatening Alexander's claim to the throne if she produced a pure-blooded Macedonian heir. At the wedding feast, Attalus, Cleopatra Eurydice's uncle, openly insulted Alexander, questioning his legitimacy and his Epeiriot mother's background. Alexander's fiery response caused a dramatic confrontation, showcasing his pride and determination to protect his inheritance, even from his own father, highlighting the precariousness of power in the ancient court. The tensions escalated to the point where Alexander and his mother, Olympias, were forced into exile, first to Epirus with Olympias's brother, and then to Illyria. This period away from the Macedonian court was fraught with uncertainty, as Alexander's claim to the throne seemed tenuous. However, it also cemented his resolve and sharpened his political instincts. He navigated this perilous time, demonstrating a capacity for cautious diplomacy and strategic patience, always with an eye on his eventual return. This temporary setback only strengthened his resolve to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, and to solidify his position as the undeniable successor to Philip II. In 336 before Common Era, just as Philip II prepared to launch his grand invasion of Persia, he was assassinated in Aegae, the old Macedonian capital, during the marriage celebration of his daughter. The motives behind the assassination remain one of history's great mysteries, with various factions suspected, including Olympias and even Alexander himself, though no definitive proof exists. The sudden, violent death of his father plunged Macedon into immediate crisis, but also cleared Alexander's path to the throne. This pivotal moment would irrevocably alter the course of history, setting the stage for Alexander's meteoric rise to power and ushering in an era of unprecedented conquest. With Philip II's death, Alexander, at just 20 years old, moved swiftly and decisively to secure his position as king. The Macedonian court was a viper's nest of intrigue, with many potential rivals and ambitious generals who might challenge his claim. His first act was to eliminate any threats to his succession, showcasing a ruthless pragmatism. He swiftly dealt with potential claimants and their supporters, demonstrating a keen understanding of power dynamics and an iron will. This immediate assertion of authority quelled any nascent rebellions and sent a clear message. Alexander was now king, and he would tolerate no challenge to his rule. Among those quickly eliminated was the young child of Philip and Cleopatra Eurydice, as well as her immediate family. Attalus, the general who had previously insulted Alexander, was also executed or compelled to commit suicide. These drastic measures, though brutal, were a necessary consolidation of power in a volatile political climate. They ensured that no other claimant could be raised against him, and that the army, whose loyalty was paramount, would support his ascension. Alexandrian scholars often portray these actions as acts of self-preservation, demonstrating the harsh realities of ancient kingship, where power was often secured through blood. Alexander's swift actions cemented his authority over the Macedonian army, whose loyalty was crucial for any successful reign. He presented himself as the legitimate heir of Philip II and skillfully secured the allegiance of key generals and nobles. His charisma and demonstrated military prowess at Chaeronea played a significant role in this. The army, now unified under his command, was ready to embark on the grand expedition against Persia that Philip had planned. Alexander inherited not just a throne, but a formidable military machine, eager for conquest and spoils, a tool he would wield with unparalleled skill and ambition. Not long after Alexander's ascension, rumors of his death began to circulate among the Greek city-states, stirring hopes of regaining their independence from Macedonian rule. Thebes, a city that had traditionally resisted Macedonian hegemony, seized this perceived opportunity and revolted, expelling the Macedonian garrison. This was a critical challenge to Alexander's fledgling reign, threatening to unravel the fragile unity Philip II had carefully forged across Greece. His response would either solidify his authority or plunge his kingdom into chaos, making it a pivotal test of his leadership and resolving power. Alexander, demonstrating his characteristic speed and decisiveness, quickly marched his army south from Macedon, covering an incredible distance in a remarkably short time. His sudden appearance outside Thebes caught the revolting city-state completely by surprise. They had expected him to be bogged down in northern campaigns or even dead. Alexander initially offered Thebes a chance to surrender, hoping to avoid bloodshed and make an example without wholesale destruction. He understood the psychological impact of his rapid movement, aiming to terrify other potential rebels into submission, rather than engage in an unnecessary protracted siege. Thebes, however, emboldened by their initial success and underestimating the new young king, refused his offer. They still believed that help from other Greek states would materialize. This defiance sealed their fate. Alexander swiftly moved to besiege the city, demonstrating his superior military tactics and the raw power of his well-trained army. The refusal served as a direct challenge to his authority, and Alexander knew that if he allowed this rebellion to stand, others would surely follow, jeopardizing his entire plan for the Persian expedition and unraveling his father's legacy of Greek dominance. When the assault finally came, it was brutal and swift. Macedonian forces breached the city walls and a fierce street-by-street battle ensued. Alexander's troops, enraged by the Theban defiance, fought with an unforgiving intensity. The fighting was particularly savage, highlighting the personal stakes for Alexander, who could not afford to show weakness. The destruction was complete and absolute, a stark demonstration of Alexander's unwavering will and the consequences of challenging Macedonian rule. The fall of Thebes sent shockwaves throughout Greece, effectively extinguishing any further thoughts of rebellion. The strategic implications of Thebes' destruction were immense. Alexander ordered the city to be razed to the ground, sparing only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar, in a gesture honoring the arts. The surviving citizens were sold into slavery. This was a harsh, calculated act designed to be the ultimate deterrent. It served as a chilling warning to Athens and other Greek city-states: challenge Alexander and face utter devastation. The swift, brutal suppression of the Theban revolt solidified Alexander's authority over Greece, paving the way for him to finally turn his attention eastward towards the vast and wealthy Persian Empire. With Greece pacified and his authority unquestioned, Alexander was finally free to pursue his father's grand vision: the invasion of the Persian Empire. This was no mere territorial squabble. It was a crusade, framed as revenge for Xerxes' invasion of Greece over a century earlier and a liberation of Greek cities in Asia Minor. The sheer audacity of the plan was staggering: to challenge the largest empire the world had ever seen with a relatively small army. Yet Alexander's determination was absolute, fueled by ambition, a thirst for glory, and a belief in his divine destiny. He meticulously prepared his army and logistics for this monumental undertaking. Gathering his forces, Alexander left Antipater, one of his most trusted generals, as regent in Macedon and Greece, entrusting him with keeping the peace and maintaining control. This strategic move ensured that his homeland remained secure while he embarked on his ambitious foreign campaign. He knew that any unrest in Greece could fatally undermine his efforts abroad. With his rear secure and his army primed, Alexander was ready to cross into Asia, leaving behind the known world to confront the daunting power of the great king of Persia, Darius III. The die was cast, and history awaited his next move. In the spring of 334 before Common Era, Alexander and his army of roughly 48,000 men crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia. This act was deeply symbolic. According to legend, Alexander personally steered his ship, and upon reaching the Asian shore, leaped out in full armor, claiming the land as, quote, Spear One. He also visited the site of ancient Troy, a pilgrimage to the heroes of his beloved Iliad, making offerings at the supposed tomb of Achilles. This moment marked the true beginning of his epic conquest, a symbolic echo of mythical heroes embarking on world-altering journeys. Alexander's pilgrimage to Troy was more than just a gesture of historical reverence. It was a deeply personal and propagandistic act. By associating himself with Achilles, he invoked the heroic past and underscored his own destiny as a legendary conqueror. He also engaged in a foot race with his companions around the tomb of Achilles, emphasizing his athleticism and martial prowess. This connection to the mythical past was a potent tool for inspiring his Greek and Macedonian troops, reminding them of their shared Hellenic heritage and their glorious ancestors, framing the Persian campaign as a continuation of ancient struggles for freedom and honor. The Persian forces in Asia Minor, led by a coalition of satraps and mercenary commanders, were acutely aware of Alexander's arrival. They mustered their armies, primarily composed of cavalry and Greek mercenaries, on the banks of the Granicus River, aiming to stop Alexander before he could establish a foothold. This river, with its steep banks and treacherous crossing points, offered a strong defensive position. The stage was set for Alexander's first major confrontation with the mighty Persian Empire, a test that would determine the fate of his audacious invasion and the resolve of his army. In May of 334, before Common Era, Alexander launched his audacious attack across the Granicus River. Against the advice of some of his seasoned generals, who suggested waiting until dawn, Alexander decided to strike immediately, trusting in the element of surprise and the morale of his troops. He himself led the charge, a tactic that would become his hallmark. This bold, almost reckless decision immediately demonstrated his daring and his willingness to risk his own life to inspire his men. It was a calculated gamble, but one that paid off, inspiring his soldiers and sowing confusion among the Persian defenders. Battle was fierce and personal. Alexander was nearly killed twice, once by a Persian noble who struck his helmet, and again when his horse was wounded. He was saved by Cletus the Black, his loyal companion, who cut off the arm of the assailant. This instance of personal peril deeply endeared him to his men, who witnessed their king fighting alongside them, sharing the same dangers. His willingness to lead from the front, rather than command from the rear, built an unparalleled bond of loyalty, fostering a cult of personality that would sustain his army through their most grueling campaigns. The Persian cavalry and Greek mercenaries fought bravely, but were ultimately overwhelmed by the disciplined Macedonian phalanx and the relentless charge of the companion cavalry. The battle was a decisive Macedonian victory, routing the satraps' combined forces. The Persian provincial army was shattered, and their mercenary contingent was largely annihilated. This victory opened up Asia Minor to Alexander, providing him with a crucial initial foothold and immense momentum, proving that the Persian Empire, despite its vastness, was not invincible, and that Alexander was a force to be reckoned with. Following Granicus, Alexander did not linger. He methodically swept through the western coast of Asia Minor, liberating Greek cities from Persian rule. Cities like Sardis, Ephesus, and Miletus welcomed him as a liberator, throwing open their gates. He restored democratic governments in many of these cities, a shrewd political move that garnered him Greek support and further isolated the Persian regime. This phase of his campaign was not just about military conquest. It was a masterful display of political maneuvering, cementing his image as the champion of Hellenic freedom against Oriental despotism. His advance was relatively swift, encountering little concerted resistance. The Persian garrisons that remained were mostly small and isolated, unwilling to confront the Macedonian juggernaut head-on after the defeat at Granicus. Alexander understood the importance of maintaining momentum, preventing the Persians from regrouping and consolidating their forces. Each liberated city provided supplies, resources, and further legitimacy for his campaign, fueling the narrative of a Hellenic crusade and demonstrating his unwavering commitment to his stated objectives. While liberating the coastal cities, Alexander also disbanded his fleet, a peculiar decision that initially puzzled his generals. His reasoning was strategic. Why waste resources on a navy when the mighty Persian fleet still commanded the sea? Instead, he would conquer the coastal cities and deprive the Persian fleet of its bases of operation. This would render their naval superiority moot, effectively neutralizing their strength by land. This bold, unconventional strategy demonstrated Alexander's innovative thinking and his confidence in his land-based army, a testament to his tactical genius that sought direct solutions to complex problems rather than conventional ones. As Alexander moved inland, he faced the legendary Gordian knot in Phrygia. An ancient prophecy decreed that whoever could untie this intricately bound knot would rule all of Asia. Many had tried and failed. Faced with this seemingly impossible puzzle, Alexander, instead of attempting to painstakingly unpick it, famously drew his sword and cut through it with a single stroke. This decisive, pragmatic act became symbolic of his approach to complex problems, direct, unconventional, and ultimately effective. It was a powerful message to his troops and to the conquered peoples, affirming his destiny as the destined ruler of Asia, a man who defied conventional wisdom. After securing Asia Minor, Alexander turned his attention south, towards Cilicia and the strategically vital Cilician Gates, a narrow pass through the Taurus Mountains. This pass was the gateway to Syria and the heartlands of the Persian Empire. Mastering it would allow him to bypass formidable mountain defenses and open a direct route to confront Darius III. His relentless drive underscored his determination to press his advantage and not allow Darius time to regroup. The successful passage through these treacherous mountains showcased Alexander's logistical prowess and his army's extraordinary endurance in difficult terrain. Darius III, the great king of Persia, had finally begun to mobilize his massive imperial army. He gathered forces from across his vast empire, including tens of thousands of elite Persian immortals and formidable chariots. Darius personally led this enormous host, intending to crush Alexander in a decisive battle. He marched his army through Syria, eventually positioning himself to cut off Alexander's lines of communication in Cilicia, hoping to trap the Macedonian invader. The sheer scale of Darius's army was unprecedented, a sight designed to intimidate and overwhelm any foe. The stage was set for the Battle of Issus in 333 before Common Era. Darius, overconfident in his numerical superiority, made a critical strategic error. Instead of engaging Alexander on the open plains where his vast cavalry could operate effectively, he moved his army into the narrow coastal plain near Issus, hemmed in by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. This confined terrain negated his overwhelming numerical advantage, particularly his cavalry, and played directly into Alexander's strength. the disciplined charge of his phalanx and companion cavalry in close quarters. Alexander, upon realizing Darius's blunder, was ecstatic. He recognized the opportunity to engage the great king directly on favorable terms. He personally rallied his troops, whose morale was already high but who now saw a path to victory against seemingly impossible odds. His speech focused on the Persian weakness and the opportunity for glory and immense spoils. Alexander's strategic brilliance was not just in battle, but in inspiring his men to believe in the impossible, infusing them with an almost fanatical loyalty that often spelled the difference between victory and defeat against numerically superior foes. Alexander once again led his forces from the front, riding at the head of his companion cavalry, directly into the heart of the Persian left flank. His charge was ferocious, aiming straight for Darius's command position. The Macedonian phalanx held firm in the center, grinding down the Persian infantry, while the cavalry on the flanks outmaneuvered their counterparts. Alexander's personal bravery and the disciplined execution of his tactical plan created chaos in the Persian lines, especially around the great king himself, who quickly found his immediate surroundings under direct threat. As Alexander pressed his attack, he came dangerously close to Darius's royal chariot. Facing imminent capture or death, Darius III panicked and fled the battlefield in his chariot, leaving his family, including his mother, wife, and daughters, behind. This act of cowardice by the great king demoralized his army, turning the tide decisively in Alexander's favor. The flight of Darius was not just a retreat. It was a profound psychological blow to Persian morale, signaling the vulnerability of their leadership and the impending collapse of their formidable forces. The pursuit of the fleeing king became a secondary but crucial objective. The Battle of Issus was a stunning victory for Alexander, though Darius himself escaped. The Macedonian forces captured immense spoils, including Darius's royal tent, his chariot, and his entire family. The capture of the royal family was a propaganda coup of immense proportions, demonstrating Alexander's complete triumph over the great king. Alexander treated Darius's family with unexpected respect and courtesy, a strategic act of magnanimity that further enhanced his reputation and sowed dissension within the Persian court, showing the contrast between his actions and the typical cruelty of ancient warfare. With Darius in flight and Asia Minor largely controlled, Alexander strategically avoided pursuing the great king immediately. Instead, he decided to secure the entire Mediterranean coastline, thereby denying the powerful Persian fleet any remaining bases of operation. This was a crucial defensive measure and a long-term strategic objective. He knew that so long as the Persian fleet controlled the seas and had ports, his lines of communication remained vulnerable to counterattack from the sea. His next major objective, therefore, was the formidable city-state of Tyre, renowned for its impregnable defenses. Tyre, an ancient Phoenician city, was renowned for its wealth and its seemingly impregnable defenses. It stood on an island approximately half a mile offshore, surrounded by massive walls, making it impervious to land attack. Its formidable navy controlled the seas, making a direct naval assault extremely hazardous. The Tyrians were confident in their ability to withstand any siege, having historically repelled numerous invaders. Alexander's decision to besiege Tyre was a perilous undertaking, a testament to his audacity and his relentless pursuit of strategic objectives, understanding that controlling this vital port was paramount to neutralizing the Persian fleet's power. Alexander embarked on one of the most remarkable feats of ancient military engineering, building a massive causeway, or mole, connecting the mainland to the island city of Tyre. This monumental undertaking involved countless laborers, stones, and timber, built under constant harassment from Tyrian ships and archers. The project spanned 7 arduous months, plagued by storms and enemy attacks. Alexander personally supervised the construction, continuously inspiring his men through sheer force of will, and by sharing in their arduous labor, demonstrating his commitment to overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles through ingenuity and persistence. To counter the formidable Tyrian navy, Alexander gathered ships from cities that had submitted to him, including contingents from Cyprus and other Phoenician cities. This assembled fleet, larger and more capable than his dismantled one, was then used to blockade Tyre, preventing crucial supplies from reaching the island and neutralizing its naval superiority. With the combined efforts of his land construction and his newly acquired naval force, Alexander slowly tightened the noose around Tyre, demonstrating his adaptive military genius and his ability to leverage new resources strategically. After 7 months of grueling effort, the causeway was completed, and Alexander brought up his siege engines. The final assault was ferocious, with Macedonian forces breaching the walls from both the causeway and by sea. Alexander himself led one of the storming parties, personally scaling the walls and engaging in hand-to-hand combat. The city ultimately fell, suffering a brutal retribution for its prolonged resistance. The siege of Tyre was a testament to Alexander's unwavering resolve, proving his ability to conquer even the most formidable and geographically challenging strongholds. The fall of Tyre was a pivotal moment. Alexander ordered the city razed, and its surviving inhabitants were either executed or sold into slavery, a harsh lesson for any who dared to defy him. This merciless punishment, while standard for the era, underscored the immense cost of resistance to Alexander's relentless will. More importantly, the destruction of Tyre effectively eliminated the Persian fleet's last major base in the eastern Mediterranean, granting Alexander complete control of the coast. This strategic victory secured his rear and freed him to continue his march unhindered into Egypt. From Tyre, Alexander marched south to Gaza, another strategically important coastal city that controlled the trade routes to Egypt. Gaza, situated on a high mound and heavily fortified, also resisted Alexander's advance. Its governor, a eunuch named Battus, defiantly refused to surrender, believing his city could withstand the Macedonian onslaught. Alexander, ever impatient with defiance, laid siege to Gaza with the same determination he had shown at Tyre, emphasizing once again that no resistance would be tolerated on his path to conquest. The siege of Gaza was shorter than Tyre's, lasting only 2 months, but it was equally brutal. Alexander adapted his siege tactics to the desert terrain, constructing earthen ramps to reach the city walls. Once again, Alexander was reportedly wounded during the assault, further demonstrating his personal involvement and bravery. When the city finally fell, Battus was reportedly subjected to a cruel death, dragged around the city by chariot, echoing the fate of Hector in the Iliad, a disturbing example of Alexander's capacity for severe retribution, potentially fueled by his personal injury during the siege. With Gaza subdued, the path to Egypt was clear. Alexander's entry into Egypt in 332 before Common Era was markedly different from his previous conquests. Instead of encountering resistance, he was largely welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. The Egyptians, who had long chafed under Persian dominion, saw Alexander as a savior and a restorer of traditional Egyptian values. He was quickly recognized as pharaoh, receiving offerings and performing ancient religious rites, effectively legitimizing his rule in the eyes of the Egyptian populace. This peaceful assimilation contrasted sharply with the bloody sieges of Tyre and Gaza. In Memphis, the ancient capital, Alexander made a point of respecting Egyptian religious customs. He sacrificed to the god Apis, visited temples, and allowed Egyptian priests to continue their traditional practices. This respect for local customs ensured the loyalty of the powerful priestly class and the general populace. Unlike the Persians, who often desecrated Egyptian temples, Alexander presented himself as a pious ruler, fostering goodwill and solidifying his political control without resorting to force. This demonstrated his pragmatic and intelligent approach to governing conquered territories. Leveraging cultural sensitivity. One of Alexander's most enduring legacies in Egypt was the foundation of the city of Alexandria. Situated on a strategic, narrow strip of land between Lake Mareotis and the Mediterranean Sea, it was designed to be a thriving commercial and cultural hub, a bridge between East and West. Alexander himself reputedly sketched out the city plan, a grid pattern that would become characteristic of Hellenistic urban design. This act of city founding showcased his ambition to not merely conquer, but to build, to leave a permanent mark, and to propagate Hellenic culture and knowledge. While in Egypt, Alexander undertook a perilous journey across the desert to consult the oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis. This journey was shrouded in mystique and danger, but Alexander was determined. The oracle reportedly acknowledged him as the son of Zu-Sahaman, a divine confirmation of his extraordinary destiny. This divine endorsement, whether genuinely believed or strategically utilized, further solidified his claims to divine parentage and leadership, boosting his personal prestige and inspiring his troops, who increasingly saw him as semi-divine. It reinforced the belief that his conquests were divinely ordained, making them unstoppable. Having consolidated his control over Egypt and secured his western flank, Alexander now turned his full attention back to Darius III. The great king had used the intervening time to raise a new, even larger army, drawn from the far reaches of his vast empire. This force, estimated to be hundreds of thousands strong, was equipped with formidable numbers of scythed chariots and war elephants, elements designed to overwhelm the Macedonian phalanx. Darius was determined to make a stand and reclaim his empire, leading this colossal force personally in what would be the ultimate test of wills. The fateful encounter was to take place near Gaugamela, a vast open plain in what is modern-day Iraq, ideal terrain for Darius's superior numbers in cavalry. Alexander, despite being heavily outnumbered, remained undaunted. He spent days meticulously scouting the battlefield, understanding every contour of the land. He gave his army adequate rest and conducted detailed planning sessions with his generals, devising a sophisticated tactical plan to counter Darius's numerical advantage. His meticulous preparation contrasted sharply with Darius's over-reliance on sheer numbers, demonstrating Alexander's tactical superiority. On October 1, 331 before Common Era, the two colossal armies clashed at the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander employed a brilliant and complex maneuver, carefully marching his flank outward to counter Darius's attempt to envelop him. This unexpected move created a crucial gap in the Persian lines, which Alexander exploited with a daring charge of his companion cavalry. His tactical genius was on full display as he masterfully coordinated his infantry and cavalry, adapting to the rapidly changing dynamics of the battle, always seeking the critical weakness in the seemingly impenetrable Persian lines. Once again, Alexander rode directly towards Darius's position, a move that replicated his success at Ishis. Faced with Alexander's relentless approach and the collapse of parts of his army, Darius III again broke and fled. His flight demoralized the remaining Persian forces, leading to a complete rout. The Battle of Gaugamela was an overwhelming victory for Alexander, a masterpiece of ancient warfare. Though Darius escaped, his empire was effectively shattered, and Alexander was now the undisputed master of the Persian heartland, his position as the great king effectively usurped. Following the decisive victory at Gaugamela, Alexander made a triumphant entry into Babylon. The city, one of the greatest metropolises of the ancient world, offered no resistance. Its priests and citizens welcomed him, tired of Persian rule. Alexander, in a show of respect for local customs, restored the temples sacred to the Babylonian gods, particularly the Great Temple of Marduk. His administrative acumen was on display, as he appointed a native Babylonian as satrap, allowing him to govern the province according to local laws while ensuring loyalty to his empire. This wise governance contrasted with Persian heavy-handedness. From Babylon, Alexander marched to Susa, the first of the Persian royal capitals. Susa, famed for its enormous treasury, quickly surrendered. Alexander discovered vast sums of gold, silver, and other precious goods, enough to finance his entire campaign and fund his ambitions for years to come. This immense wealth was a tangible symbol of his conquest and allowed him to pay his soldiers generously, further cementing their loyalty. The capture of Susa signified that Alexander was not just winning battles, but systematically dismantling the very infrastructure of the Persian Empire and assimilating its resources. Alexander then turned towards Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, a city of immense symbolic importance. Built by Darius I and Xerxes I, it was the architectural embodiment of Persian imperial power. Its grand palaces and treasuries represented the heart of the Achaemenid dynasty. Capturing Persepolis was essential not just for strategic reasons, but also for its profound psychological impact, signifying the complete overthrow of the ancient Persian dominion and the ascendance of a new order under Alexander, a stark statement to the entire world. Alexander's entry into Persepolis was met with a mix of awe and destruction. While he initially occupied the city peacefully, a controversial decision was made to burn the magnificent royal palace. Reports vary. Some sources claim it was a deliberate act of revenge for the Persian burning of Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars, influenced by the courtesan Thais. Others suggest it was an act committed while Alexander and his men were heavily intoxicated. Regardless of the exact circumstances, the burning of Persepolis was a dramatic symbolic gesture, marking the end of the Achaemenid Empire and the beginning of a new Hellenic era. The destruction of Persepolis sent a clear message to the world. The Persian Empire, as it had been known for centuries, was irrevocably over. Its symbolic heart, a representation of its power and glory, lay in ashes. This act, while perhaps stemming from a moment of passion or calculated revenge, deeply impacted the psyche of the conquered Persians and solidified Alexander's position as the new great king. It was a transition from one epoch to another, a brutal but effective turning point that demonstrated the finality of Alexander's conquest and his willingness to utterly dismantle the old order. Following the fall of the traditional Persian heartlands, Alexander was determined to capture Darius III, believing that as long as the great king remained alive, he would be a rallying point for resistance. Darius had fled eastward, attempting to raise a new army in Bactria and Sogdiana. Alexander embarked on a relentless pursuit, leading his army on a grueling march through vast, unforgiving territories, pushing his men to their absolute limits. This chase underscored Alexander's unwavering resolve and his personal desire to achieve unambiguous victory and sole dominion over the immense empire. The pursuit of Darius was arduous, covering immense distances through difficult terrain. Alexander and his men endured harsh conditions, extreme heat, lack of water, and relentless marches. This phase of the campaign demanded extraordinary endurance and loyalty from his troops. It demonstrated Alexander's own physical resilience and his ability to push himself and his army beyond conventional limits, cementing his image as an unparalleled leader who shared in every hardship endured by his men. The relentless nature of this chase showcased Alexander's singular focus on eradicating the last vestiges of Persian imperial authority. It was during this pursuit that Darius III was ultimately betrayed and assassinated by his own satrap, Bessus, in 330 before Common Era. Bessus, who declared himself Artaxerxes V, hoped to gain Alexander's favor or establish himself as the new Persian ruler. Alexander, upon discovering Darius's body, was surprisingly mournful. He gave Darius a royal funeral and later pursued and punished Bessus with extreme cruelty for his treachery. This act demonstrated Alexander's respect for kingship, even that of a defeated foe, and his utter contempt for treason, solidifying his image as the legitimate successor, not just a conqueror. With Darius III dead, Alexander declared himself the rightful successor to the Achaemenid throne, adopting the title King of Asia. This marked a significant shift in his objectives. No longer merely freeing Greece or avenging past wrongs, he was now actively building a new, multi-ethnic empire. However, Bessus's declaration as King of Asia and Bactria challenged Alexander's claim, forcing Alexander to continue his relentless eastward march into the rugged, remote provinces of Bactria and Sogdiana, where he would face fierce resistance and guerrilla warfare unlike anything he had yet encountered. The campaigns in Bactria and Sogdiana, which lasted for several years, proved to be some of Alexander's most challenging. The local populations, hardy and fiercely independent, employed guerrilla tactics, ambushing Macedonian forces in the harsh mountain terrain and scorched plains. Unlike the set-piece battles against Darius, this was a protracted war of attrition against an elusive enemy that knew the land intimately. Alexander and his army were pushed to their limits, enduring bitter winters, cunning traps, and constant skirmishes. This phase honed his adaptability and capacity for psychological warfare. The leader of this resistance was Spitamenes, a Sogdian warlord of immense cunning and charisma. He proved to be a formidable adversary, repeatedly inflicting losses on Alexander's forces and evading capture. Spitamenes launched raids, stirred up local rebellions, and masterfully exploited the vastness of the territory. His persistence forced Alexander to adapt his military strategy, employing smaller, faster units and engaging in intense counterinsurgency operations, demonstrating Alexander's ability to learn and overcome new forms of warfare. The pursuit of Spitamenes was personal and relentless. One of the most famous incidents from this period was the siege of the Sogdian Rock, a seemingly impregnable mountain fortress where many Sogdian nobles had taken refuge. Alexander dared his men to scale its sheer cliffs, promising rich rewards. Against impossible odds, a small contingent of his elite climbers managed to ascend overnight, surprising the defenders at dawn. This audacious feat, combined with the psychological impact of being reached on their unreachable fortress, compelled the Sogdian defenders to surrender. It solidified his reputation for overcoming any obstacle, no matter how daunting. During his campaigns in Sogdiana, Alexander encountered Roxanne, the daughter of a local Bactrian nobleman. He fell deeply in love with her and married her in 327 before Common Era. This marriage was a significant political and personal act. It helped to pacify the region, showing Alexander's willingness to integrate with local populations and adopt local customs. For his Macedonian generals, however, it was a controversial move, seen as embracing barbarian practices and potentially elevating a non-Greek to a position of immense power, further straining relations within his inner circle. Alexander attempted to implement policies of cultural integration, encouraging his Macedonian soldiers to marry local women and incorporating Persian nobles into his administration. This policy, known as the fusion policy, was met with considerable resistance from his veteran Macedonian troops and generals. They saw it as a betrayal of their Hellenic identity and a dilution of their hard-won supremacy. The tension between Alexander's vision of a unified Eurasian empire and the ethnocentric views of his Macedonian core army became an increasingly significant challenge to his leadership. The relentless nature of the Eastern campaigns, compounded by the cultural clashes and Alexander's increasing adoption of Persian customs, led to growing unrest and conspiracies within his own ranks. Key incidents like the murder of Cletus the Black, Alexander's loyal companion, in a drunken rage, highlighted the immense psychological pressure Alexander was under and the fraying loyalty within his inner circle. These events revealed a darker, more volatile side to Alexander, a leader struggling to balance ambition, cultural integration, and the loyalty of his increasingly weary men. The relentless pursuit of Spidomenes eventually led to his death, delivered by his own frustrated allies. His head was sent to Alexander as a peace offering. With Spidomenes gone, the last significant organized resistance in Bactria and Sogdiana collapsed, and the regions were finally pacified. This brought an end to over 2 years of brutal guerrilla warfare, allowing Alexander to consolidate his control over these remote eastern provinces. This period taught Alexander valuable lessons in counterinsurgency and adaptive warfare, even as it tested the limits of his army's endurance and loyalty. With the eastern provinces largely secured, Alexander turned his gaze towards the vast and legendary land of India. Stories of its immense wealth, exotic animals, and philosophical sages had long captivated the Western imagination. His true motivation remains debated. Some say it was insatiable curiosity, others, a belief in reaching the ends of the earth or the limits of the known world as described by Greek geographers. Regardless, the invasion of India represented Alexander's continued drive for exploration and conquest, pushing into a realm largely unknown to the Western world, a testament to his boundless ambition. To reach India, Alexander led his army across the formidable Hindu Kush Mountains, one of the most challenging geographical barriers in the world. The pass was high, treacherous, and covered in snow. His army faced extreme cold, avalanches, and the constant threat of starvation. This arduous crossing was yet another testament to the Macedonian army's incredible endurance and Alexander's logistical prowess. He pioneered routes, established supply lines, and ensured his army's survival against extraordinary natural obstacles, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in ancient warfare. As Alexander descended into the fertile plains of the Punjab region, he found a land fragmented into numerous small kingdoms and tribes, each with its own ruler. This political landscape presented a different challenge than the unified Persian Empire. Instead of one grand confrontation, Alexander faced a series of regional rulers, some cooperative, others fiercely independent. Understanding this fragmented power structure, Alexander strategically sought alliances where possible, leveraging local rivalries to his advantage, showcasing his diplomatic flexibility when outright conquest was not always the most efficient path. Some Indian rulers, like Taxiles of Taxila, recognized Alexander's superior power and offered their allegiance, hoping to gain an advantage against their local rivals. Taxiles provided Alexander with valuable resources, guides, and intelligence, demonstrating the effectiveness of Alexander's approach to local governance, where mutual benefit could be found. These alliances proved crucial as Alexander pushed deeper into unknown territory, relying on local expertise to navigate the complex political and geographical landscape of India. They served as vital supply points and bases of operation for his advancing forces. However, not all Indian rulers were so accommodating. The most formidable among them was King Porus, who ruled the region between the Hydaspes and Arsacenes rivers. Porus was a giant of a man, renowned for his courage and the strength of his army, which famously included a contingent of powerful war elephants. He refused to submit to Alexander, preferring to defend his homeland with all his might, setting the stage for one of Alexander's most challenging and iconic battles. Porus represented the indomitable spirit of resistance, an unexpected challenge in the Far East. The armies met at the Hydaspes River in 326 before Common Era. The river was swollen by monsoon rains, making a direct crossing perilous against Porus's entrenched forces and his terrifying war elephants. Alexander, facing yet another seemingly insurmountable river barrier and a formidable enemy, once again demonstrated his strategic brilliance. He employed an elaborate deception, creating diversions and feigning multiple crossing attempts to confuse Porus, carefully observing his movements and identifying the opportune moment for a decisive strike. Alexander executed a daring night crossing of the Hydaspes, upstream from Porus's main encampment, under the cover of a fierce thunderstorm. This audacious maneuver, reminiscent of his crossing of the Granicus, allowed him to gain a foothold on the opposite bank relatively unmolested. A small Persian contingent that Porus had sent to check this perceived feint was swiftly defeated, clearing the way for Alexander to engage Porus on more favorable terms. This successful clandestine crossing was crucial, as it allowed Alexander to bypass Porus's initial defensive preparations and unleash his disciplined forces on an unsuspecting foe. The main engagement, the Battle of the Hydaspes, was a brutal and hard-fought affair. Porus's war elephants initially wreaked havoc on the Macedonian infantry, inspiring terror and breaking their ranks. However, Alexander's disciplined phalanx eventually adapted, targeting the elephants, sensitive legs, and their mahouts. The Macedonian cavalry under Coenus also executed a masterful flanking maneuver that enveloped Porus's forces, turning the tide. This battle was one of Alexander's most challenging, showcasing his army's resilience and adaptability against an entirely new, fearsome weapon system. Despite the fierce resistance, Alexander ultimately prevailed. King Porus, severely wounded, remained on his elephant, fighting bravely until the very end. Alexander, deeply impressed by Porus's courage and dignity, sent messengers to offer him terms. When brought before Alexander, Porus carried himself with immense pride, asking only to be treated as a king. Alexander, recognizing his adversary's greatness, not only restored Porus to his throne, but also granted him control over additional territories. This act of magnanimity was a testament to Alexander's respect for noble opponents and his strategic foresight. The Battle of the Hydaspes was a costly victory for Alexander. While victorious, his army had suffered significant casualties, and the terrifying experience of fighting against war elephants left a lasting impression. The campaign had pushed them further east than any Western army had ever gone, and the prospect of continuous warfare against even more powerful Indian kingdoms, whose elephants were reputedly larger and more numerous, began to weigh heavily on his weary troops. This battle marked a turning point in his army's morale and their willingness to continue their relentless eastward march, despite their triumphs. Alexander's ambition remained boundless. He intended to lead his army further east, towards the Ganges River and beyond, convinced that he was nearing the outer limits of the world and seeking to fulfill his understanding of ancient Greek mythology and geography. However, his veteran Macedonian troops, who had been campaigning for 8 long years, were utterly exhausted and homesick. They had endured countless battles, harsh climates, and immense distances, and they had reached their breaking point, a stark contrast to Alexander's unyielding drive. At the Hyphasis River, the final major river barrier before the vast plains of the Ganges, the famous mutiny occurred. Alexander's army, led by generals like conquests, firmly refused to advance further. Despite Alexander's impassioned pleas and arguments about glory and reaching the ends of the earth, his men were unwavering. This was the first time his army had directly defied him, a crushing blow to his authority and a stark realization of the limits of his absolute power, even over his most loyal soldiers. Alexander, after 3 days of secluding himself in his tent, attempting to sway his men through appeals to their loyalty and ambition, finally had to concede. The will of his army had broken his own relentless will. It was a rare and humbling defeat for the conqueror who had never tasted true military defeat. He ordered the construction of 12 massive altars to the Olympian gods on the Hyphasis River, symbolizing the furthest extent of his dominion and a poignant memorial to his unfulfilled ambition. This retreat marked the end of his eastward quest. Having abandoned his plans for further conquest in India, Alexander decided on a return journey that was as audacious as his invasion. He chose not to retrace his steps through the challenging land routes, but to construct a massive fleet to sail down the Indus River to the Arabian Sea. This decision aimed to explore the unknown coastlines and discover new trade routes, combining retreat with continued exploration, a testament to his unending curiosity and desire for discovery, even in the face of setback. As the fleet sailed down the Indus, Alexander led a significant portion of his army along the riverbanks, engaging in further subjugation of local tribes. This riverine campaign was another series of hard-fought battles, especially against the Malians, a particularly fierce and warlike tribe. During one assault on a Malian city, Alexander once again led from the front, scaling a ladder and leaping into the city alone, where he was severely wounded by an arrow. His life hung in the balance, a terrifying moment for his army, who feared losing their irreplaceable leader. The severe wound Alexander sustained against the Malians nearly killed him and deeply affected his army. For days, his life was uncertain, and his men openly wept, fearing the end of their campaigns and the dissolution of their collective purpose. His eventual recovery was met with immense joy and relief, solidifying his already legendary status among his soldiers as a man protected by the gods. This brush with death further reinforced his personal mystique and reminded everyone of the precariousness of their grand enterprise without his unparalleled leadership. While Alexander recovered, his admiral Nearchus was tasked with leading a portion of the fleet through the Arabian Sea, exploring the unknown coastline and attempting to find a sea route back to the heart of the empire. This was an unprecedented voyage into uncharted waters, filled with danger and uncertainty. Nearchus's successful navigation through treacherous seas and his careful documentation of the coastlines opened new trade routes and greatly expanded Greek geographical knowledge, completing Alexander's vision for comprehensive exploration, even in retreat. Alexander, with the larger part of his army, chose to march back through the Gedrosian Desert, a vast, arid wasteland in what is now southern Pakistan and Iran. This decision, perhaps driven by a desire to outdo Cyrus the Great's disastrous crossing or simply to explore new territory, proved to be one of the most catastrophic passages in military history. His army endured unimaginable suffering, extreme heat, lack of water, sandstorms, and disease. Thousands of soldiers, camp followers, and animals perished, making it a stark reminder of nature's indifference to even the greatest conquerors. The Gedrosian March was a profound test of Alexander's leadership. He reportedly shared in every hardship, walking alongside his men, foregoing his own share of water to encourage them. His personal example of perseverance, even in the face of such overwhelming loss, was legendary. While the march was a logistical nightmare resulting in immense casualties, it arguably solidified a deeper bond of respect and loyalty from his surviving troops, who witnessed their king endure the same hellish conditions. It became a grim testament to the extraordinary endurance of both Alexander and his dwindling forces. Against all odds, Alexander's main army eventually emerged from the Gedrosian Desert, a shadow of its former self, but unbroken in spirit. The reunion with Nearchus's fleet, which had successfully navigated the coast, was a moment of immense relief and celebration. Both groups had survived seemingly insurmountable odds, forging an even deeper bond through shared suffering and extraordinary achievement. The successful, albeit costly, return from India marked the culmination of Alexander's grand expeditions, signifying that he had indeed explored the furthest reaches of the known world, achieving his geographical ambitions at a great cost. Upon his return to the heart of his empire, Alexander discovered that many of his appointed satraps and governors had abused their power, mismanaged funds, and even planned rebellions during his long absence. Alexander moved swiftly and ruthlessly to reassert his authority. He executed several corrupt officials and generals, a stark warning against insubordination and mismanagement. This demonstrated his unwavering commitment to maintaining control and order within his vast, newly acquired territories, showing that his long arm of justice reached even the most distant provinces, reminding everyone of who held absolute power. Alexander continued his policy of cultural integration, famously orchestrating the mass marriages at Susa in 324 before Common Era. Over 10,000 Macedonian soldiers were wed to Persian and other Asian women in a grand ceremony, with Alexander himself marrying two more Persian princesses, Statera and Parysatis, daughters of Darius III and Artaxerxes III. This was a bold attempt to forge a unified Greco-Persian ruling class and to create a mixed population, ensuring the long-term stability and cohesion of his multi-ethnic empire. This fusion policy, however, remained deeply unpopular with many of his veteran Macedonian soldiers and officers. They resented Alexander's adoption of Persian customs, such as Oriental dress and the expectation of proskynesis, prostration before him, a practice they considered demeaning and suitable only for barbarians, not free Greeks. The growing alienation between Alexander and his most loyal Macedonian core led to increasing dissent and several near mutinies, showcasing the deep cultural chasm that Alexander was struggling to bridge and the limits of his charismatic authority over his proud and independent Hellenic warriors. The most significant direct challenge to Alexander's authority during this period occurred at Opis, near the Tigris River, in 324 before Common Era. Alexander, planning to dismiss and send home tens of thousands of his older, disabled, and battle-weary Macedonian veterans, replaced them with a new contingent of Persian cavalry and infantry, trained in Macedonian style. This sparked a full-blown mutiny, as the Macedonians felt discarded and replaced by their former enemies. They demanded collective demobilization, expressing their outrage at Alexander's perceived betrayal and their growing resentment of his eastern policies. Alexander faced the mutiny at Opis with his characteristic courage and decisiveness. He personally addressed the angry troops, reminding them of their shared victories and his own sacrifices alongside them. He identified and executed the ringleaders, then secluded himself, refusing to eat until his men, humbled and desperate, begged for his forgiveness. This dramatic confrontation ultimately reaffirmed his authority, but it was a deeply emotional and symbolic moment that revealed the fragility of the bonds between a king and his loyal but exhausted army. The mutiny forced Alexander to reassess his approach to his veterans. Alexander also further integrated Persians into his military, forming new units composed of Persian youth trained and equipped in the Macedonian style. These epigoni, or successors, were envisioned as the future backbone of his multi-ethnic army, a testament to his ambition to create a cross-cultural military force loyal to him alone. This policy, while strategically sound for the long-term empire, deepened the resentment among some Macedonians who felt their unique martial identity was being diluted. One of the most devastating personal losses for Alexander was the death of his closest friend and companion, Hephaestion, in Ecbatana in 324 before Common Era. Hephaestion was not just a friend, he was Alexander's alter ego, a trusted confidant, and a highly capable general. Alexander was utterly devastated by his death, plunging into deep grief. He ordered a period of extensive mourning, executed Hephaestion's physician for failing to save him, and planned an elaborate, costly funeral in a monumental tomb, highlighting the depth of his personal attachment, transforming personal grief into a costly public spectacle. Alexander's grief for Hephaestion was so profound that it bordered on the obsessive. He sought divine honors for his deceased friend, consulting oracles and commissioning a massive funeral pyre and memorial in Babylon that was an architectural marvel. This prolonged period of mourning and the extravagant veneration of Hephaestion was seen by some as excessive, even mad, further isolating Alexander from some of his generals. His profound grief underscores his intense emotional nature and the deep personal cost of his relentless ambition and the loss of his most intimate confidant. As Alexander returned to Babylon, his administrative acumen was again at the forefront. He initiated ambitious plans for further exploration, including a circumnavigation of the Arabian Peninsula, demonstrating his continued geographical curiosity. He also embarked on a massive project to improve the navigability of the Euphrates River, ordering the dredging of canals and construction of new harbors, transforming Babylon into an even greater maritime and commercial hub, proving that his ambitions extended far beyond military conquest and into the realms of trade and infrastructure. Despite his many accomplishments and plans, Alexander's health began to deteriorate. Years of grueling campaigns, numerous battle wounds, relentless stress, and heavy drinking had taken their toll. The exact cause of his final illness remains a subject of intense historical debate, ranging from malaria or typhoid fever to poisoning. What is clear is that a combination of factors contributed to his rapid decline, affecting his powerful physique and dimming the light of his indomitable will, culminating in a mysterious illness that would abruptly end his reign. In late May of 323 before Common Era, Alexander fell gravely ill after a prolonged banquet and drinking bout in Babylon. His symptoms included fever, chills, and increasing weakness. Days turned into weeks of suffering. As his condition worsened, his generals and closest companions grew increasingly anxious, aware that the fate of the immense empire rested precariously on the life of this one man. A palpable sense of dread filled the royal palace, as the doctors struggled to find a cure, knowing that the world was holding its breath. As Alexander lay dying, his soldiers, desperate to see their legendary king one last time, filed past his bed, a silent, solemn procession. He could only greet them with a slight wave of his hand, too weak to speak. This poignant farewell underscored the deep bond between Alexander and his men, a testament to the loyalty he had inspired through shared hardship and unparalleled leadership. It was a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey and an emotional farewell to the man who had led them to the ends of the earth. Alexander the Great died on June 10th or 11th, 323 before Common Era at the age of 32 in Babylon. His last words, when asked who should inherit his vast empire, are famously recounted as, "to the strongest" or "the best man." These enigmatic words, if true, perfectly encapsulated his life's philosophy of meritocracy and constant striving. His sudden death left a monumental power vacuum, plunging his immense empire into immediate chaos and conflict among his generals, a legacy as impactful as his life. The world was forever changed by the passing of its greatest conqueror. The immediate aftermath of Alexander's death was a struggle for his body. His generals, known as the Diadochi, initially vied for control of his remains, believing that possessing them would confer legitimacy and a symbol of authority. Eventually, Ptolemy I, one of his most trusted generals, successfully diverted Alexander's body to Egypt, where it was interred in a magnificent tomb in Alexandria, becoming a cult site for future generations. The journey of his body itself became a legend, a symbol of the splintering empire. With no clear successor and Alexander's infant son, Alexander IV, and unborn child, Hercules, considered too young, the empire was immediately carved up by his ambitious generals, the Diadochi. These successors spent the next 50 years embroiled in endless wars, each seeking to establish their own Hellenistic kingdom from the fragments of Alexander's vast dominion. This period of intense conflict and political maneuvering fundamentally reshaped the Hellenic world, marking the beginning of the turbulent but culturally rich Hellenistic age that would endure for centuries. The Hellenistic age, born from the remnants of Alexander's empire, was a period of unprecedented cultural exchange and diffusion. Greek language, art, philosophy, and political institutions spread across vast territories, from the Mediterranean to India. New cities like Antioch and Pergamon became centers of Hellenic learning and commerce. This monumental spread of Greek culture, far beyond the narrow confines of the Greek mainland, was arguably Alexander's most lasting and profound legacy, creating a synthesis of East and West that influenced civilizations for millennia. Alexander's insistence on founding cities, many named Alexandria, served as strategic military outposts, trade centers, and bastions of Hellenic culture. These cities became melting pots, fostering intellectual and artistic innovation. The most famous, Alexandria in Egypt, became a beacon of learning, home to the legendary Library of Alexandria, which housed the sum of ancient knowledge. These urban centers propagated Greek ideals and served as enduring physical manifestations of Alexander's vision for a unified, enlightened world, however forcefully achieved. Beyond the political and military sphere, Alexander's campaigns had a profound impact on science and geography. His expeditions led to extensive exploration and mapping of previously unknown territories, from the Hindu Kush to the Arabian Sea. His scholars and naturalists documented new species of flora and fauna, expanding the scientific understanding of the natural world. This thirst for knowledge, instilled by Aristotle, ensured that his conquests were not merely destructive, but also profoundly contributive to the burgeoning fields of ancient science and cartography. Alexander's military innovations, from his flexible phalanx tactics to his masterful use of combined arms, influenced military strategy for centuries. His personal charisma, leadership from the front, and ability to inspire unwavering loyalty in his troops became the gold standard for future commanders. From Julius Caesar to Napoleon, many military leaders studied Alexander's campaigns, seeking to emulate his tactical brilliance and his capacity to forge an unbreakable bond with his soldiers, making him an eternal archetype of the conquering hero. Alexander the Great, a complex figure of unparalleled ambition, charisma, and ruthless determination, left an indelible mark on history. His relentless will forged an empire that stretched across 3 continents, spread Hellenic culture, and forever altered the course of the ancient world. His life, a whirlwind of conquest, exploration, and intense personal drama, continues to captivate and inspire, a testament to the extraordinary power of a singular vision. He remains, arguably, the most influential military commander in history, a legend whose shadow looms large across millennia, a true titan. The enduring mystique of Alexander stems not only from his military genius, but also from his enigmatic personality. He was a man of contrasts, a fierce warrior yet a student of philosophy, a ruthless conqueror yet capable of great magnanimity, a pragmatic statesman yet a dreamer of divine destiny. This fascinating complexity has fueled countless interpretations and stories, making him a perpetual subject of study for historians, philosophers, and artists across cultures and centuries, each seeking to unravel the true motivations behind his extraordinary life. His legacy is, however, not without its darker aspects. His conquests wrought immense destruction and cultural upheaval, and his ambition often led to brutal reprisals against those who resisted. The cost in human lives, both civilian and military, was staggering. Yet, even his critics often concede that Alexander inadvertently created a fertile ground for the cross-pollination of cultures, driving intellectual and technological advancements that transcended the immediate destruction, making his legacy a powerful blend of triumph and tragedy, progress and ruin. The tales of Alexander the Great spread far beyond the Western world, becoming enshrined in Arabic, Persian, and even Indian lore, where he is known as Iskandar. These diverse narratives often portray him in different lights: a prophet, a sage, a just ruler, or a mythical adventurer. This widespread embrace of his figure across cultures attests to the universal appeal of his story and the power of his legend, demonstrating how dramatically he impressed himself upon the collective consciousness of the vast territories he traversed. Decades after his death, the Hellenistic kingdoms founded by his generals, the Seleucid Empire in the east, the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, and the Antigonid kingdom in Macedon and Greece, continued to be powerful forces, shaping the political landscape for centuries. These successor states maintained and further propagated Hellenic culture, built magnificent cities, and fostered new forms of art, philosophy, and governance, ensuring that Alexander's influence endured long after his own demise, truly ushering in a new globalized era. Alexander's extraordinary life poses timeless questions about leadership, ambition, and the pursuit of destiny. Was he a visionary who sought to unite the world under a single enlightened civilization, or a ruthless conqueror driven by insatiable ego and a thirst for personal glory? Perhaps he was both. His story remains a powerful testament to the human capacity for achievement against seemingly insurmountable odds, embodying the relentless will of a man who dared to dream on a scale unmatched by almost any other figure in history, forever challenging us to consider the limits of our own aspirations. The very act of his conquest inadvertently fostered the conditions for the Pax Romana, as the Hellenistic world he created eventually became the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire. The Greek language, which Alexander had spread, became the lingua franca of the Eastern Mediterranean, persisting for centuries and forming a vital link for the early Christian Church. This unforeseen long-term impact on the cultural and linguistic fabric of the ancient world is perhaps one of the most subtle yet profound aspects of his legacy, shaping the future of global communication and interaction. Alexander's influence also permeated religious thought. His encounter with the oracle of Sewa, acknowledging him as the son of Zeus Ammon, resonated with Hellenistic rulers who subsequently adopted similar claims to divinity. This fusion of Greek and local religious beliefs contributed to the concept of ruler cults, profoundly impacting the political theology of subsequent empires, including parts of the Roman Empire. His life became a blueprint for divine kingship, setting a powerful precedent for centuries. Ultimately, the legend of Alexander the Great transcends simple historical fact. It is a narrative woven into the fabric of human aspiration, a story of a youth who, armed with intellect, unparalleled courage, and an unyielding will, dared to conquer the known world. His journey from a Macedonian prince to a godlike emperor serves as an eternal reminder of the transformative power of ambition and the lasting impact a single individual can have on the course of civilization. His legacy invites us not merely to admire but to ponder the very nature of human potential.